Nossa, agora não podes.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I just want to give everyone a warm welcome and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I think many of you here know that I'm Erin Hallett and I'm head of alumni relations at the business school. When I was looking through the attendees before I joined this afternoon, I saw so many names I recognize, and I just want to say how lovely it is to be amongst our friends, even virtually, and everyone here at the business school is so grateful for your connection. I hope wherever you are in the world that you and your loved ones are safe and well. Before I hand over to Dean Veloso, I want to go over the format for this afternoon. Dean Veloso is going to give a brief update about the business school, after which he will initially answer some of the most common questions we received from alumni for this afternoon's event. We'll then have about 40 minutes to take your questions. We ask that all questions be typed into the chat box, and a reminder that this event is being recorded. Lastly, I want to personally thank our business school alumni community for your overwhelming support the last few months. I know many of you have volunteered your time with our students, helped our recruitment and careers teams, and engaged with Plexus and our online events. We are grateful. The business school is here for you. We are committed to strengthening our alumni community, providing networking opportunities, and supporting your professional development throughout your career. Please don't hesitate to reach out to our team with any questions or suggestions. You will see our email address posted in the chat throughout today's event. Now it's my great pleasure to welcome Dean Francisco Veloso.
Hello, everybody, and good afternoon, and or depending on where you are, maybe good morning or good evening. I'd just like to welcome you to this time that we're going to be spending here chatting a little bit about what's been happening with the business school and how we're reacting, but also how you've been involved in what we've been doing. And all of this is quite important. It's quite important for us. And before I start, telling a little bit about the business school and the evolution since then, let me just share with you a couple of different things. One is just an invitation. As you saw, there is a Mentimeter going on with a few opportunities to ask a few questions. And so there's a first question that is up about how you've been affected, and so that's an opportunity to start some of the engagement, and we'll get back to your answers a little bit later on. And then the second thing is just basically a word of sympathy. I realize, and this is true even for the business school, that many of us have been affected by this terrible virus, and this is the stress, pressure, loss of income, job, but also illness, and even, unfortunately, deaths. And so I just want to express that sympathy to all of you, because I'm sure that either directly or indirectly, many of you have been touched by this terrible pandemic. And so I think my first word, I wanted it to be just of sympathy and an understanding, because we certainly feel that very much, and this is, is present all throughout our school. There's faculty and staff of the school that have lost loved ones. And so we know that this touches in many different ways, some of them very personal and very difficult. And so this is the first message that I wanted to share with you. The second message, as we start to tell you a little bit about the school, has to do with kind of the transition. And I think it's quite important, basically, and this story is perhaps not different from many other businesses and many other environments. At the business school, on March 13th, we decided to move everything remotely. And that's in particular teaching, assessment, but also research, and to do it overnight. In the beginning of the following week, this was a Friday, we would be doing everything remotely. And this, as you can imagine, was extremely challenging. But effectively, as we look back, it was remarkable how smooth that transition took place. And that's, of course, because of the faculty, the professional staff, and the students, and how much efforts, but also flexibility, engagement, and understanding went on to allow for that transition. So over the following few weeks, hundreds of modules and thousands of exams went, from being handled on college to all being handled remotely. And this was a remarkable, movement. And I remember that, the following week, it was the first time that we're going to have, literally hundreds of students taking digital exams. And we had done some pilot testing with some of these tools to do remote exams. And I remember distinctively in January, having been discussed with the exams teams how we needed to stage our scaling up of remote and digital exams. Well, we went very quickly from pilots to full production, from one time to the other, and effectively with a lot of success. And I'm deeply grateful to the very significant effort that went to make sure that took place, and that took place as smoothly as possible. And that was, the transition really took place like that because of the great experience and the capabilities of our faculty and our EdTech team. Unfortunately, we've been investing in digital capabilities and digital education for many years now. And we have a wonderful group, our EdTech team, that's really capable and at the forefront of what it is to be, basically delivering very high quality digital education using very sophisticated tools. And we've had, many of our faculty that have now had that experience before we did the transition, and they helped others, and they engaged and they supported as we had to transition the entire capability. And we did it in kind of 3 stages. We had a first stage, what we call stabilization. That's what I was telling you about, is how do we make sure that we can deliver things digitally in a structured way and in a way that allows our students and our community to achieve their learning outcomes and to continue with their degrees. And this was the first stage of our transition. The second stage of our transition were what we call enhancements. Having been able to do that transition, we wanted to make sure that we would create the best experience possible. And this was quite important because, we've been offering through our global online MBA, our business analytics online, and other digital programs, a variety of these offerings that are done digitally. But of course, that the courses were set up to be delivered in the classroom, with the students present. So we had to adapt and to adjust. And we really, and that was a very important part of this transition, was to bring the experience that we had in our digital tools and say, how do we create and move the classrooms to a way that we can benefit from this experience? And so, for example, one very important part of that is how you think about case discussions. The way you do case discussions digitally, you start with a variety of activities ahead of the synchronous element, just like we're doing now, and prepare for that. Smaller groups, interaction, build up, and then you engage through the digital lecture where everybody's connected through Zoom. And porting that experience all throughout, what we're doing online was an extremely important part of that adjustment. And that's what we called the enhancement stage. And this was, of course, focusing very much on what the students needed to continue with their degrees. And that, was a very important part of the effort. But a very other important element that complemented that had 2 elements. One was to do things that go beyond just the classes. What about projects? How are we going to do that? How are we going to move forward with that? And it was amazing to engage with the students, but also very importantly, to also engage with you, our alumni community, to source virtual projects. And that was a very important part of finding opportunities to do digitally on parts of the learning objectives that do not require and are not necessarily associated with what's happening in a given classroom. And that was a very important part of it. And the third part, also on the student side, had to do with the co-creation with the students. What I mean about these is that, of course, that while we're talking about the classrooms and what we're talking about, what happens in terms of course A, course B, or even projects, we're talking specifically about the content, about the learning objectives on the core material. But we know that the student experience goes beyond that. And as alums, you all know that as well or better than I do. All the things that happen around that was going to be affected by this pandemic. So we also embarked in a very important step, which is to co-create with our students. And here the DSAC, the student representatives played a very important role in trying to understand what the students felt would be very important for them and create what we called a student experience package, which was to say, okay, we recognize that some of that experience is lost when you're not able to meet with your colleagues around or have a seminar that for a guest speaker that's coming into campus. What can you do to really replace that? And that was a very important co-creation step, because with the students, we were able to identify a set of steps that helped to create a different experience. And that's something that, for example, allowed the students that lost student trips this year to go next year, and many other examples that we could talk about on things that we tried to do with the students in terms of their engagement and creating, of course, a different but yet very valuable student experience, some of it extending into the future, for example, allowing the students to participate in electives the following year if they're interested, and many other examples to create their engagement. But when we talk about the evolution of the school, it's not just about the students, although the students and their transition was, of course, very important. The other very important part had to do with the staff, both our professional staff and our faculty. And there's an element of communication and engagement. What do we need to do to make sure that we continue to work together, even though we're now all distributed? And this is something that we drew to a variety of tools. There was elements of communications using opportunities such as the one that I'm having right here with you to talk directly to the staff using virtual mechanisms, leveraging tools like Teams to create engagement mechanisms that are more digital. Not that we were not doing that before, we were, but just that scaled up to a completely different level from what we were doing before. But also find ways to support people that are working remotely, because as we know, it's very hard to do that. And many people have challenges because they don't have the adequate work environment, or they have to care for kids. That certainly was my experience. I have 3 daughters. 2 of them were 5 and 6. In fact, one of them was just trying to come in and eventually participate in this seminar just a few minutes ago. And she sometimes does that. So I know all too well how difficult it is to be working and at the same time, for example, to support homeschooling for kids, or to support an elderly parent, or to have a difficult environment because of your roommates and many other circumstances, or not having enough access or stable internet, many other difficulties. And so creating ways to support the people that are working remotely and make sure that they're engaged, but also supported while doing that was quite important. And of course, and that's the third part, to continue our work and engagement, work in terms of research. Make sure that the projects that the faculty were working on could continue. That is something that faculty are usually used to, because many of their research is happening with colleagues around the world, and they don't have the requirements of a physical lab like many of our colleagues in physical or natural sciences or medical sciences. So they can do that in a different way. But also an important element, which is external engagement, making sure that we can connect to and talk to institutions around the world about the work that we're doing here, both ongoing work, but also new work related to the pandemic, which was quite important. And this is something that, of course, we're very proud of. And our faculty really immediately took on to engage in COVID-related work. And that's just through media commentary and reactions and advice related to what was happening. Research that was directed and devoted into that area, but also blogs and other commentary. And if you connect to our website or through our social media, you saw probably many of these examples of things that went further and that were quite important. And this is something that makes us very proud because, of course, even beyond the business school, there's a lot of amazing work that Imperial College is doing to support and to react to the pandemic. Of course, a lot of visible one is related to the epidemiological work that's done and trying to understand what are the implications of the virus for people around the world and what are the strategies and the policies that we can put in place to react and to overcome it, as well as, of course, the vaccine development that is quite important. But besides that, all the work that we're doing across to try to just understand the implications of these, be it, for example, the economic implications, to understand what are the impacts of the packages that the government's putting out to respond to the pandemic. All these elements are areas where our faculty and our researchers have been very actively engaged in a very important way and very much contributing to our understanding of the pandemic around the world. And this is something that I am very proud, and you also as alums should be very proud because of the amazing work that the business school and the faculty, as well as the rest of our colleagues in Imperial, are doing and contributing to this very important challenge. The third part relates to innovation. So I told you that we had a first part, which is stabilization, then a second one, enhancement, trying to make the best of our flexibility and our capabilities to adjust to the new environment. And then the third part is what we call innovation. And that has to do with thinking about what's going to happen, starting with the autumn term here at Imperial or anywhere around the world. And this has different parts to it. The first one has to do with a new cohort of students, therefore engaging with our applicants and with the people that are wanting to come to study at the business school and trying to work with them to let them understand how is it that they can come to Imperial and really make the most out of their learning experience despite the important challenges that we're all facing. And surprisingly, and this is quite important, although we were very worried at the beginning of what we would do to applications, actually our applications have grown 30 to 40% this year. And while we are, of course, preparing for a range of different scenarios in terms of what happens in September in terms of the students that actually come, we are at the moment very hopeful that a cohort very close to what we were expecting, will arrive to campus to start their classes. Now, start their classes in a different way, and that's quite important. Of course, it's not the same of the experience that you had as students at Imperial College. There's going to be social distance. There's going to be many protocols that are related to health and safety, because of course, we want to create a wonderful learning experience, but above everything, there has to be the health and safety of our staff and our students. And therefore, together with our colleagues in the Faculty of Medicine that are, of course, at the forefront of understanding this pandemic and all the limitations and all the behaviors of the virus, we've been preparing very detailed protocols and steps to really work, in terms of what's going to happen in the fall term. And this has, two important innovation parts. One is what we call our enhanced format or our multimodal delivery. Effectively, we have adjusted our lecture theaters to be able to connect to people remotely by having, microphone arrays and screens at the back of the amphitheaters, so that we can have people both in the classroom and remoted connecting to our classroom and be able to engage, so that we're going to be able to offer an opportunity to learn whether you're on campus, whether you're in the classroom or not. And what we're going to do to create social distance in the classroom is have less people present in each classroom and basically be able to cycle A and B or ABC, the groups, so that the students can engage in the classroom, but also when they're not in the classroom because of these restrictions, that they're going to be able to connect remotely. And that's a very important part of our innovation. So taking the experience that we've been having in terms of the best of digital delivery and create a hybrid multimodal delivery environment, which we believe is at the forefront of education anywhere in the world and will be for the next year. And then we've also created, a different types of engagement that leverages these digital tools. We've created a series of seminars called Imperial Future Matters that is precisely around engagement and reflecting on what's happening around the world and be able to leverage the capabilities and the experience and the research of many of our faculty so that they can be at the forefront of reflecting and helping people around the world to reflect on what's happening. And you had a very recent example with a seminar by Jonathan Askell, where we invited our alum to join, which is exactly around this type of issue. So I want to create a lot of opportunity for Q&A. And so I just wanted to give you a general sense. And the general sense is this one that, of course, a very important challenge, but where I really feel that through the very hard work, the capabilities, the experience, but also the resilience and flexibility of all our community. And all our community is our faculty, is our professional staff, is our student, but also you, our alumni, because you've been, amazingly engaged and supportive throughout this time, through projects, through classes, by offering opportunities to our graduating students for jobs, a variety of different ways. And we're really grateful for that. And so I really think that we're being able to weather this very challenging environment the best way possible and to create an environment to learn and to continue to thrive that of course has limitations, of course has concerns, but I really think that given the environment, we're doing a really good job and preparing very much to welcome the new group and send this group into a graduating class that we believe is going to be very successful now into the future. So I think I'll pause here now in terms of just giving you an initial perspective and start to work through our questions so that we can have a more engaged perspectives. And Erin has a few initial questions that have started already that you supplied ahead of time.
Yeah, so I just want to take a moment here too to have a look at the Mentimeter results. Hazel, if you can bring up that screen while we just take a look at some of the questions that were submitted. So if you haven't had a chance to participate yet, please do go onto Mentimeter and use the code above. So Francisco, we did get quite a few similar questions, and I know you touched on some of these things in your opening remarks. But the first one was, to what extent has the business school partnered with private and public organizations throughout the crisis via providing resource, support, or thought leadership?
Sorry, I muted myself. That's part of the habit of always muting so that you're not interfering in the in somebody else's conversation. So that's a very good question and a very important one, because and I mentioned some of these aspects when I was doing my introductory remarks, because many of the things that we try to do, especially in terms of the research and engagement, we're not doing just ourselves. We're doing with an engaged community. And this is both public and private as well as ourselves. So let me give you some examples. Professor Stephen Hansen in the economics department, did a study with BBVA in Spain, which was featured in The Economist. It was one of the first economic analysis of real time of what was the size and the nature of the economic impact of COVID, in this case, looking at data from Spain. And this was a partnership with a few institutions in Spain, including private. BBVA provided the data, as well as public, Pompeu Fabra and others, that we connected to really do a very interesting and a very important study that was very detailed about the size, but also the shape of the economic implications by looking at transaction data, microtransaction data in Spain. And that was one example. Another really interesting example is all the work that Carol Proper, who's currently the president of the Royal Economic Society, is doing. So the Royal Economic Society has been providing a lot of advice to government in terms of the new packages and initiatives that are coming out to counter the economic implications of COVID. And this is both personally herself as president of the Royal Economic Society, but also facilitating a variety of other partners to connect and to contribute in the reflection that's happening in government. And that's a very important element of the contribution. And then more broadly, one very important contribution has been at this interface between health and the economy. So we've partnered with the School of Public Health, which, as you know, has been very involved in the epidemiological part of the work, and the national health systems, and many other partners to try to understand this interface between what are the health implications of COVID, but also what are the economic implications and how they connect the two together, so that we have a very good understanding of these, because this has the direct implications of the fact that there is downturn in economic activity, but there are many other very important implications. For example, the implications of a variety of treatments that are not made and diagnoses that are not made. And some of our academics, Marisa Miraldo, for example, and Franco Sassa have been very much at the forefront, and Carol herself, of trying to understand that particular issue. There are issues of inequality that have been very much in the media because the pandemic is not affecting all demographics and, for example, all genders, as well as all protected characteristics in the same way. And doing that work is quite important, and we've been involved in that. And then the final comment that I wanted to make is just in terms of media. You know, one very good example is David Miles, who of course has had a wonderful experience on the policy side as a former member of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England, and he's been, working a lot in this area connecting to COVID, and therefore he's been providing a lot of commentary in the media about just trying to better distill and understand, what happens, both in terms of the implications of the virus, but also, for example, how the new economic policies to try to counter that are having different impacts in businesses and in individuals. And this is just one of many examples that I could share. And this is what I'm saying, that there are things that connect both private and public to really support and offer thought leadership. And as I mentioned in my initial remarks, many other pieces that we've volunteered directly through our website and through blogs and social media, that if you've not yet had the opportunity, I would really encourage you to do, which is just log into our website of the school, and you'll see a heading on COVID-19, and you'll see a summary of some of the recent commentary and recent contributions in this area. A lot of them in partnership that are quite important there. So I think these are just some of the examples. I could give you many others.
Great, thank you. So the next question is less about COVID and more about the Black Lives Matter movement and the horrific things that happened to George Floyd. And this question is about how can alumni help the school in its endeavors for equality and opportunity for all?
Thank you very much. I mean, this is something that's very important, and I'm personally, for many reasons, feel very close to this issue. And you may have had the opportunity to read the communication I did to the entire community. Effectively, I mean, you saw the version that I shared with the alumni, but there was an equivalent one that was sent to our students and to our staff. This is a very important part of what we see our mission. If we want to change the world and be a force for good, we want to do it in a way that really is equal and inclusive to all. And this is has been brought to much greater visibility, and rightly so, recently because of the Black Lives Matter set of events, horrible events that we know, but also through the fact that we know very, very clearly that even the virus is not affecting all characteristics equally, and not all, and also not the genders equally. This is all quite important. So we want to engage with you, and that's a very important part of what we want to try to do. We want to engage with you. We have internally at the business school, we have a diversity committee that's very much taken on board. In fact, we have already over the last few years an important work in the area of gender, and we've applied to what's called the Athena Swan project and initiative that basically recognizes the effort and the work that's done for gender equality. But our diversity committee of the business school had already decided to embrace race in particular, as well as sexual orientation, as two areas of priority for work that we were going to be doing this year. And the Black Lives Matter only basically accelerated our concern and our drive to have an impact. And there's many different things that we're doing internally, also with our students, but we're trying to reach more broadly. And in fact, we'll be emailing a survey, an anonymous survey to our alumni related to precisely equality, diversity, and inclusion, to ask for your advice and your feedback on this topic. And and what do you think are the most important elements that we need to take in consideration to make sure that we, as a school and as a university, can really prepare our students to thrive in global and inclusive organization. And this came out of one of the recommendations from students as part of this effort that I was telling you about that we're doing this year, which has an important part of the students. And we want to connect to you and to be able to get your opinion and your perspectives on these. And so we will be, on the top of this service, we'll also be reaching out and inviting you to share your story, your views, your suggestions, and also to connect directly to students regarding these important issues, or to be speakers in this area at the business school, not just on racial diversity, but also issues like unconscious bias, mental well-beings. These are things that we really like to engage more with you. So I will invite you to participate, to contribute to this survey, but also then to let us know that you would like to share your views, your perspectives, and to help our students and our community to do a much better job than we are doing now, because this is an area that we know we need to do much more and to be much more impactful. And this is not just at the business school. You may have heard about the initiatives that we have at the college level. There's several initiatives, something related to our own logo, but also we've started a group that's going to be looking at the history of Imperial and trying to reflect a little bit about how racial issues have been present as part of the history of the college, and we may want to change some of the ways that we do things to try to create a more inclusive and open and diverse environment. So we're doing a lot. We are going to invite you to do even more by having your engagement and your contribution, and I'd really like to invite you and welcome you to do so.
Thank you, Francisco. So you've already sort of touched a bit upon this question, but I think this is a good opportunity to get into some more specifics about how we can support the alumni community right now, and also to have a look at this first Mentimeter, where it looks like just over half, about all the participants who participated have been affected, about 5.5 out of 10 on how much their career and aspirations have been affected. But the next Mentimeter question, which Hazel is going to bring up, sort of addresses this question in terms of how can Imperial offer the opportunity of a network to its alumni that can provide networking and support, and what are the steps for doing that?
Thank you, Erin. And it was very interesting to see the results about how your career has been affected. So we see that we're half of the scale, but there is a very significant diversity, and I think that's what we're hearing from many of you, people that are close to that people are feeling this impact. This is something that is deep, that is profound, that is significant. But also it depends on the area and in the field that you are. We also know that many of our alumni are in the area of tech, for example, and we know that in the area of tech and digital, this is one of the areas that have been growing. And so I think that the results that we were seeing on that Mentimeter really provides a very good view of this diversity of situations and the impact that it has. But still, as you can see, a very significant impact that we all need to recognize in our lives and in our context. Now, more specifically about the issue, and do keep going and contributing to the to the answer on the Mentimeter. We'll see where we are on that. Is that, you know, we do have a variety of instruments to connect with you and to, you know, basically create an opportunity for network and for you to explore and to leverage that network. And so I think one important is even starting with, you know, connecting with our own team, you know, alumni-business@imperial.ac.uk, you know, and basically that, you know, we'll be posting that during the event so that you can email us at any moment. But also, I'd like to encourage you to go on to Plexus, which is, you know, the platform that we have to connect our alumni. And this is quite important, as you know, because of GDPR regulations, we need you to engage and to let us know that you want to share and others want to share and engage in terms of the network of alumni. So I really encourage you to explore that and to connect, to be able to benefit from that. But of course, there is the business school alumni LinkedIn group, which is a very important tool. You know, I myself feel that increasingly I see myself using LinkedIn as a vehicle to connect to you, our alumni, to share what's happening in the business school, and these are all very good examples. And then, you know, you can also attend or volunteer at one of our virtual professional interest networking events that we have regularly. We have active groups now for marketing, from women, healthcare, and we're going to be hosting a variety of events this autumn. So this is an opportunity for you to connect, and through that to leverage our network and opportunities that can come through that. And beyond the business school, there's also at the college level, you know, there's several events. You know, one coming up on the 28th of July. Tomorrow is an alumni spotlight that's going to come over tomorrow. But, you know, there's going to be several others, and we very much would like to invite you to connect and to engage with us. And remember that, you know, there's lifelong career support for you, mock interviews, CV reviews, and these are all available to you through our Simplicity Jobs portal. And I would again encourage you to connect to it and to explore, because that's quite important. And I can see that, you know, there's some answers here in Mentimeter, and, you know, invite you to continue and to engage more with this issue. So
thanks, Francisco. Yeah, and just to say that if any of you have any suggestions for us on how we can, you know, put together events that you find more valuable or you're interested in getting involved, just do reach out to our team, and you'll see the address in the chat. Our next question is, do online classes give us more of an opportunity to interact and do projects for companies? So the course has more components that interact with real problems, corporate teams, and current challenges. And maybe some examples of that would be great as well.
So thank you, Aaron, and for that question that people sent us. I mean, I think that's a very interesting question, and one that I think is worthwhile basically exploring, because one of the things that we did see is precisely that we can engage faster digitally, and the support that we got through our alumni was amazing. In fact, you know, when we were thinking about our consulting projects, we were worried because all of a sudden the physical consulting project was going to disappear, and everything started to change very quickly when we sent out an email to a few of our alumni, starting actually the first one was in the area of the international health management alumni, and asked them, you know, do you have some projects that you could do with our students digitally? And the results and the response was overwhelming, and we ended up ending with a surplus of consulting projects. And this is not just in international health management, across the business school. When we did that, we really got overwhelming response. And this is one of the very interesting examples of how the digital can enable in a very quick and very productive way to engage and to get that example. And, you know, we had very interesting example. For example, we did projects with Genpact, which is a professional services firm, where, you know, with the COVID-19, you know, the financial institutions were having to react very quickly, and they wanted to make sure that they were operational resilient across many different business services. And so students worked with them to explore how prior stress testing and mapping could be ported around a variety of different services and really do this operational stress testing much beyond what had been done before. And this type of consulting project was then very valuable for Genpact, for them to work with many financial services to do this type of work, and had tremendous impacts. Same thing, we worked with Shell Chemicals to look at the impact of COVID-19 on chemicals and plastics industry. We worked with a hospitality startup Blend to explore digital transformation solutions for the hospitality sector post-COVID, and how the sector could and should adapt given these new circumstances and remain profitable. And we're seeing many, many other things that are happening on this stage. And so all of these are just example of projects that were done because of you and your contribution and your involvement. But also the students themselves were very resourceful and took on that idea of doing something that is tangible and impactful. For example, they did the COVID-19 recovery hackathon to generate sustainable solutions to the challenges that are faced by businesses post-lockdown, by individual businesses and industries, and trying to, and work with companies from Morgan Stanley, IBM, Kraft Heinz, and many others to really try to explore that. And then that hackathon was followed by a Code to Care conference that include many panel discussions and keynote presentation, and another week-long hackathon with representatives from business school, but also NHS England and various healthcare startups to try to find new tools and solutions for the healthcare sector. So, very specific but very valuable examples of how we can effectively do exactly what you suggest. And I think we're all seeing that one of the very interesting opportunities that comes out of these very challenging environment that COVID brings is this different way to engage people virtually in a way that's different. And for example, the way that we're setting up our induction week is going to benefit from that, where we're having a variety of very top-notch speakers that, because they can connect digitally, are going to be able to connect and to contribute for half an hour, 1 hour of their time with all our community that's arriving to start our degrees in September, and being able to do so precisely because of this new world. And so I think we're all seeing a very different interactive and real-time connection that I think over the medium run is going to benefit a lot the students and the business school ultimately.
Great. Thank you, Francisco. We'll just take this last question before we open it up. And I see we've already got some questions in the chat box. So the last question I'm going to ask you is, how do you reconcile often conflicting research and teaching objectives at the business school?
So, I mean, this is always a difficult balance to do, and it's not just now, not just in the environment that we're seeing now. I mean, balancing research and teaching is always challenging because there are two conflicting goals. Of course, as a part of Imperial College, we proud ourselves to be at the cutting edge of research and intellectual leadership to really advance our understanding of the world, and that comes through very high level research. At the same time, we want to make sure that the students have a wonderful learning experience, and that faculty devote the time and the effort and the involvement to create that experience. And I think by and large, we're successful there. And the thing that I believe that we're doing ever more is to also connect the two, because that's very much at the heart of the Imperial experience, is to take the cutting edge research that people are doing and bring that to the classroom in an important way. So if it is in the area of fintech or climate change and finance, or is it in the area of leadership and responsible and ethical leadership, it's about making sure that we're at the edge of that research, but also we can connect that back to what happens in the classroom. And I think if we, as we do, take that to the heart of what it is to be at Imperial College, and specifically at Imperial College Business School, I think we will continue to thrive and be successful. And that's happening during COVID, very much in terms of what happened with the opportunities that many faculty has pursued in precisely research related to COVID-19. So across all departments, management, economics, finance, analytics, we're seeing many of our faculty realizing that because of the significance of this of this pandemic, that it is important to shift some of their research efforts and really be at the forefront of exploring this topic and then bringing it back to the classroom. And this is something that we're already seeing happening across many different areas. And this is one example of how you take a difficult situation, which is the fact that people having to balance this different new situation, very pressing one, and turning it around and creating also an opportunity. And I think that's the way that our faculty really think about that. And I believe that, of course, with a lot of very hard work, with a lot of engagement, that they will find that right balance. Of course, the fact that now they had to spend a lot of time retooling their courses for this digital environment will and is undoubtedly having some impact on research, in the sense of, for most people, the productivity may not have been quite the same because they have to adapt. But I think that when I talk to all the faculty, they realize that that's just the way it goes, and they're doing that adjustment because they understand that that's what it's required for the business school to be successful and for all our community to be successful into the future.
Thank you, Francisco. So we've got about half an hour left for you to ask questions in the chat, and there's a few questions that have come in the last little bit. So I think a good one to start with would be, is the work that we're doing looking at the economic effects of the pandemic directly advising the government, similar to the epidemiological work, apologies for my terrible pronunciation, being done elsewhere at Imperial? Or is the main output in the form of academic research papers and reports?
I think it's both, and actually let me take the epidemiological baseline that's mentioned in this question by Vasco, which is one of the criticism that early on was presented to the work that Neil Ferguson and his team did, was that that they were putting things up that had not gone through the scrutiny of peer review and be published. And eventually they did that, but of course they put it publicly and for advice for government ahead of time, because the process of peer review and scrutiny takes time and takes effort, and to make sure that you do that properly, you should not hold it back before you provide that advice. And so that's the way I see that our academics are also taking this. Many of them are providing direct advice, and I gave you some examples of the work that's being done, for example, that Stefan Hansen and Carol Proper are doing related to advising the government on the economic side about their package that they're putting out, but also in terms of macroeconomic responses. There's both. There's very high-level research, and the work that Stefan did is a working paper that's now under review at a major journal. It will take its time before it comes out as a publication, but that's been quite important to measure the significance and the size of the economic impact in a much quicker way compared to the lengthier statistical tools that the National Statistics Office tends to have, and with very sophisticated and up-to-date economic tools that our wonderful researchers have. So the way that I see these is very much, as you mentioned also on the epidemiological side, is both, is trying to contribute to be at the forefront of policy, but also publish high-level research. Another example is the work that we're doing with the International Energy Agency. So our Center for Climate Change and Finance has produced a very important report looking at what can we do to make sure that when we come out on the other side of this pandemic, we do that to a much more sustainable future. And this was something that was working to produce a report that's very much for public policy consumption and for policy makers to consume. But the person that's heading the academic side of that center, which is Patrick Bolton, is a leading world academic in economics that's very much at the forefront of publishing in the top journals, and therefore out of this work will also come the high-level publications that are influencing academia. And this is something that's very much at the heart of our strategic positioning at the business school, which is We want to be at the forefront and the cutting edge of research, but do it in an engaged way that really can make a difference for business and society. And this is something that we're already doing. And I think that COVID, if anything, has brought to the forefront of how important that is. And the most recent example is actually the new center that we just announced on responsible leadership. We've been working in creating this center with Citi already for over a year, and we've announced it now. And if anything, the idea that leaders need to be ethical and responsible, if anything, has only been brought to the forefront. It was already there, it was already very present before, but COVID and the variety of responses that leaders have provided to COVID, some amazing and some, really dreadful, really has even given new urgency to how important to have responsible ethical leadership. And that again is both engagement, but also having people like Celia Moore and Nelson Phillips that are at the forefront of academic research, really pushing that understanding also on the research side. And so, and I think that's going to be present all around going into the future.
Thank you, Francisco. You talked a bit about this earlier, but we've had a question asking, is the word imperial problematic in the terms of the BLM movement? And what are we doing about that?
I mean, of course, imperial does bring this difficult connection to the imperial past of, the empire of Britain. But I think that, and no doubt that the history group that I've just mentioned to you, that imperial is setting up, will look at that issue. But also, I think that many of us feel that, when we think about Imperial College, it's part of its history. And, I'm not going to be substituting myself to the work that we are going to be doing over time in terms of looking at our past. But I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to find a balance in terms of our own identity and our history, and making sure that, our past and the origin of the imperial name is a very different environment from where we are now. And that's not the way that people see Imperial College. And that's, we see it, I think, as a very different environment, and one that's really caring and that really strives for inclusion and diversity. And that's what we all are striving to and aspiring to. And but we need to face, the realities of our present and our past, and that's why we've commissioned this study to try to do an engagement and reflexive work on these. That's going to provide some recommendations and some reflections on many of our historical issues and past, and hopefully you also, as our dear and close alumni, will be able to contribute with your own views and suggestions.
Great, thank you. And appreciating that none of us have a crystal ball, but do you foresee a time when our teaching and how we manage and work with students will revert back to pre-COVID?
That's a very good question. I mean, I think it will depend, of course, on the vaccine that we're about to develop. Not in a way, and this is important, and if you've followed some of the recent work, for example, there was a piece on The Atlantic very recently about, the expectations that people have about the vaccine. I mean, I don't think we should look at the vaccine as a way that is going to get rid of the pandemic, because it's now, as all the specialists, I mean, this is not my area of research, but the advice and the information I've gotten from our specialists is that it's now distributed enough that's going to become endemic, but we're able to protect ourselves. And so to the extent that the vaccine is going to be successful, one vaccine is going to be successful, and we have, over 150 vaccines under development, some of them 3 or 4 quite advanced, is that it will allow us to be protected and to have tools to make sure that we can start to connect without having the concern. And as we know, the issue is the groups. I mean, there's a huge asymmetry in terms of the implication of the vaccine. And so if we're able to protect the more sensitive group, the elderly, the people with certain conditions, and find ways to find the right priorities to protect the groups that are in bigger need, then we can start to have more flexibility in the way that we connect, not in a way that's going to make the pandemic or the virus disappear, but in a way that we're going to mitigate very significantly the very negative impacts that's going to have on our community by protecting the right people and eventually making it more widely available to the population. So if everything goes well, I think that even in the spring semester, we should be able to start to have a different environment. But of course, that's going to be hedging on some of the results that we're going to have between now and then. I mean, if things progress slower, then I think that it may be only during the summer, I would say, the summer term next year. And the expectation is that, as I said, that at least one of the vaccines will become available. And one thing that's important is that it's actually important that there's going to be multiple vaccines, because there's not one type of vaccine for everybody. Vaccines work differently. They have different requirements, different manufacturing and costs, for example. And, one of the big opportunities that's behind the vaccine that Imperial is developing, for example, is the fact that because of the technology, it requires very low dosage and very low cost to manufacture compared to other vaccines that may cost, several dozen, pounds to manufacture. The vaccine of Imperial may cost a few pounds to manufacture, for example. And that can be a very important element as we think about solving the pandemic, not just in terms of what happens at Imperial and what even happens in the UK, but we need to think that to solve this issue, we need to think about it in a global environment. And that's very much the way that we think about that. And we've, some of you may have read, I mean, we're fortunate enough to have just, Andrew Whitty, Sir Andrew Whitty, accept to chair our advisory board, and is now one of the co-leads of the WHO Vaccine Development Program. And so I'm hoping that, in 1 or 2 years from now, we're going to have an opportunity to look back and learn, not just for Imperial, not just for the business school, but throughout the world, the lessons of what it is to really fight this pandemic and the steps that we need to be taking to get to a new normal, whatever that new normal is.
Thank you, Francisco. So we've had a question about what role can we play, and the business school play, in fighting ethical behavior, this lack of ethical behavior in business and government. And I know you touched on some of that with some of the research that's being done. This question references disasters such as Grenfell Tower and the Boeing MAX 8 crashes. So if you could just talk a bit about that, a bit more about that, that would be great.
So as I mentioned, I mean, this is something that we were already thinking that was quite important. And if you reflect back, or if we reflect back on, when we wrote the strategy for the business school, 2 years ago, what's there at the heart and the way that we summarize it is leadership in a tech-driven world. And the tech-driven is, of course, obvious because we are the business school of Imperial College, and we're very much at the forefront of tech, innovation, entrepreneurship, and using that and leveraging that, for social transformation. But the reason why we put that leadership there is not by accident, is because we think it is really, really important that we as a business school are seen to be at the forefront of basically shaping what it is to be a leader in this environment, and to do it in a way that is ethical and responsible. So when I mentioned to you how excited I was about this new Center for Responsible Leadership, is precisely because this is something that I think is being brought to a new height in terms of role and responsibilities. And so we've been very fortunate, for example, to attract to the business school a year ago Celia Moore, who's a world leader in the area precisely of ethical leadership. That's the work that she focuses on, is how do we make sure that we educate people and that we train leaders to be ethical. What are the tools and what are the instruments to make the ethical dimension much more present, but also what are the instruments that need to exist in organizations to make sure that everybody is accountable and that we promote an ethical leadership environment. She works a lot with financial institutions and regulators And, the pandemic has just brought that to a new heightened role. And so, we are working very hard to review all the initiatives that we have internally in terms of the education across all our levels, our MBAs, our master's levels, to make sure that leadership is much more present. Because, and the way that I tend to frame that, and I do this in the welcoming speech, to our students when they arrive on campus, is I tell them, look, this transformation, digital technology is happening around us, and we can take different perspectives when we're faced with it. We can be on the passenger seat and see it happening and be paying a lot of attention and be a good analyst to try to understand what's happening around us and to provide the right leveraging and the right understanding about what's happening. Or we can be on the driver's seat and really be basically pushing that, driving that transition for a better future. And this is the way I see the responsibility of our students, our community, our alumni, is to be on that driver's seat. And we cannot do that if we do not do it in an ethical and responsible way. And this is something that I feel that I'm very passionate about, and I think it's really at the essence of what the business school is and needs to be. And so we're already doing more, and this new center will allow us to expand that into a different set of activities in a very significant way.
Thank you. And just on that note, Joanne Linder, who I think many of you know, has also made a comment congratulating us on the new center, which is lovely. So thanks, Joanne. Another question here, is there an opportunity for alumni to connect with the professionals and academics that are making the effort towards the climate change and sustainable recovery, and to learn about the latest research, trends, and collaboration?
Most definitely, and that's there's at least two instruments for us to connect to that, and a new one that's still not very visible, but it will become soon. So one is through the work that the Grantham Institute does across college. And so the Grantham, like all the institutes across Imperial, belong to everybody. I mean, they're not engineering, natural sciences, or medicine, or the business school. They cut across, and the business school is very involved. And so, if you connect to the Grantham Institute and follow the publications, the work, the initiatives that the Grantham does, you will be very much at the forefront of what's happening at Imperial more broadly in terms of basically how do we transition towards a more sustainable society. And there are many initiatives. There's a new one called a net zero net pollution initiative that's starting at Imperial. And this is part of a very important strategic endeavor at the college level, that we want a sustainable society to be very much at the heart of our strategy across Imperial College. Now, when we connect to the business school specifically, what we've been trying to do is to link, the tech side and the new technologies and solutions that are being developed at the rest of college, and connect it to the expertise of the business school in economics and in finance and in management. And there, I would say that there are two main instruments. One is the Center for Climate Change and Finance and Investment, which is connecting work like that of the Grantham Institute with our wonderful finance department, and really understand how we can bridge that gap in finance to meet the Paris goals. And it's huge. I mean, we did a conference with the World Bank last year, and basically the way that they put it is to say, look, we need to be investing on the order of $3 to $4 trillion annually into climate-friendly, investments. We're at about $1 trillion. So there is a $3 to $4 trillion per year gap in terms of the amount of investment that we need to put in to get to Paris. And the center is really about trying to understand that gap and what needs to be done to be able to move the dial in a significant way into that investment. The other area relates not to the finance, but to the managerial aspect, because we know very clearly that if we want businesses to be at the forefront of sustainability, there are important changes in the governance, in the incentives, in the strategy at the very high level of the firm. So this year we created the Leonardo Center, which is exactly about how do we create a much more sustainable business and a much more sustainable society. So my invitation to you is to connect to our centers, to connect to the Grantham Institute at the college level, to connect to the Center for Climate Change, Finance and Investment, to the Leonardo Center. If you subscribe to their newsletters, if you engage with their initiatives, you will get an opportunity to be very much at the forefront. And also, we're very much interested in engaging with you and your companies in developing the agenda for these initiatives. And so if you're a finance professional in a leadership role and you'd like to, learn more, but also engage and contribute to the Center for Climate Change and Finance, do get in touch. The same way, if you're really at the heart in the strategy division, thinking about how do you make sure that the strategy of your firm is in a very much sustainable journey, connect to Leonardo and explore opportunities to do more and to learn more, because we're very excited about what we're doing in those levels, as we will be with the responsible leadership as we develop the research agenda for that one as well.
Thank you. And I just saw a follow-up question to that and about connecting with the Leonardo Center. And my team will get back to you on that very shortly. We'll provide you some contact information, so just bear with us. We've had another question about an alum who has some connections in South Korea and mentioned the contrast between their ability to track and trace and the absence of that system in the UK. Is there any way the business school could help with implementing effective track and trace here?
So that's a very good question. I mean, this is work that we're doing with in some collaboration with the School of Public Health and provide some advice. And I mean, if you want to read some of the by our academics about what's happening behind that, it's very much worthwhile to read the blog post by Carol Proper and Nelson Phillips about the centralization and decentralization decisions that have been done around that. And so what you will see through that post is that they were precisely talking about the fact that the too centralized approach in some of the test and trace that have been done in the UK has been one of the difficulties of making it successful. And that's one of the several decisions that they feel has not been the more adequate one on the government in terms of what to do centrally and what to do decentralized in a decentralized way to be able to fight this pandemic. So that's one snippet of how we're trying to convey and to contribute to that through the business school, but also in collaboration with our colleagues in the School of Public Health. We've been very involved in providing advice and trying to offer a variety of guidance, but at this stage we are an academic institution and there are policy decisions, and some of them are not made in the direction that we think are the most productive. And that's why I was mentioning that blog by Carol and Nelson, where you see a very sharp look at how they don't agree with some of the decisions that have been made and they would have done it in a different way. And so the dialogue continues and the adaptation continues, and we will continue to provide the best advice possible to get to a good outcome on the test and trace. But this is an ongoing journey where we will continue to engage and we'll continue to influence, because we, like you, want to get the best outcome possible on this very difficult challenge.
Thanks, Francisco. So we've answered all the questions and we are coming close to the end of our time. So I just wanted to ask you if there's anything else you wanted to say. One thing I wanted to mention is looking at the webinar chat, which is great to see everyone chatting and talking about various things. It does remind me that another thing our team can help you do as alumni is get together with your classmates virtually. So there's opportunities, and we've had a couple successful Zoom reunions in the last few months and had some great academics come and speak to the classes. So if you do want to have a reunion with your class, please do let us know. That would be great. It would be great to hear from you. Francisco, is there anything you'd like to add?
Just a couple of elements that I wanted to add. So first is to thank you, for your engagement, for your contribution, to be here with us, and also to thank our own team, Erin, and the alumni relations team for the organization of this initiative. One of the things that's quite important, this is something that Erin and I talked extensively, is that when I mentioned to you a couple of times during the Q&A in my initial remarks that we want to be a school that's engaged with business and society, and our main window to that is your alumni. You know, the alumni of the business school, and more broadly the alumni of Imperial. And something that we started when I began as a dean was precisely a very engaged set of initiatives to be able to connect to you. And you may remember that Erin and I had set up basically a world tour to go around and talk to where some of our main places where our alumni community is based. And we're hoping, one of the reasons that we're hoping that the pandemic recedes is that it will allow us to resume our ability to visit you personally. But also, I think one very interesting opportunity that connects to some of the questions that many of you posed and some of my answers is that as we all move into a new way of connecting using digital tools, such as the one today, we can connect in different ways. Not that that replaces the opportunity to go and meet you personally and to hear a little bit about your stories and to engage with you in a nice cocktail in a nice part of the world. And this is something very much that that I will continue to cherish and that I'll continue to look forward. But you know, it does allow us to continue in connection, to learn from you, to hear from you, but also for you to hear from us. And so what you can count on is that I will continue, and together with me, the rest of the business school, through our alumni team, but many of the others, to want to engage with you and to continue this journey that it is to be close to our alumni, to learn from you, but also to give you the tools, the opportunity, the knowledge, and the learning that allows you to continue to be successful in your career, to explore new opportunities, and to take new risks and new chances, because we are a school that strives for entrepreneurship, for innovation. And so we're going to continue this journey, and we will continue to do that with you. And so thank you very much for your participation today. Thank you very much beyond today for all your support to the business school. I very much look forward to continue to chat with you, to learn from you, and to share with you all the amazing things that are happening in our dear school. Thank you very much.